So let me start by introducing our next presenters, and they are Kate Armel and Laura Zuber from QSM. So Kate Armel is our Director of Testing, Training, and Technical Support at QSM, and she has 19 years of experience providing technical and consultative support for software estimation, project tracking and forecasting, and industry benchmarking. She oversees data collection, validation, and data analysis for the QSM database, development of over 90 industry regression trends, client, internal, and technical support services, software testing and quality assurance, training, documentation, and online help for SLIM Suite and SLIM Collaborate applications, APIs, and utilities, and technical writing, research, and analysis to support product development, research, and consulting services. Kate was the chief editor and analyst and co-author of the 2006 QSM IT Software Almanac and has authored several published articles, which you can find up on our website. We also have Laura Zuber, who is QSM's Customer Support Manager and Lead Trainer. She has 25 years of experience in software development consulting, training, and support. She has conducted training and coaching sessions for all QSM SLIM Suite tools and helped customers implement SLIM across a wide variety of processes and platforms. Laura has managed software development projects, served as a senior software process improvement specialist, performed process assessments, designed and implemented best practices, and authored numerous training programs. She is a certified Scrum Master and lead consultant for using SLIM with Agile development. So with that, I will let them get started.
Okay, so Laura and I would like to thank you for hanging around for our last presentation today, which is really going to be about the evolution of SLIM tools over the last 40 years. Today we're going to take a look at the past, present, and future of the SLIM suite of tools. We're going to start off by showing you some historical data that we've collected over the years, and then we're going to step through the development timeline for the suite of tools. Next, we're going to take a look at some ways that you can customize and extend our current tool capabilities using our APIs, utilities, and integrations. Hopefully some of these things will already be familiar to you, but if not, we're looking forward to introducing you to a lot of the features that we have to sort of allow you to do different things with our tools. And finally, we're going to take a brief look at some upcoming releases. We'll talk really quickly about how we decide which features to develop and how our clients can contribute and have contributed in the past to the future directions of our tools. So to sort of kick off our review of the SLIM product development timeline, I thought it might be fun to show you how the sheer volume of code that was required to implement our product lines has changed over time. So what we're looking at here along the bottom axis here is our timeline. And over on the vertical axis we have size in thousands of source lines of code, or what we call case lock. And these blue bars that you're looking at here represent the desktop suite of tools. So here right at the beginning we've got the very first versions of SLIM, which is really at this point was pretty much SLIM Estimate. And then we've got the rest of the suite, which is Control, Metrics, Data Manager, and Master Plan. And at this point we're adding in some APIs and integrations and utilities. And finally, in about 2010, you're going to see these gold bars up here, and they represent SLIM Collaborate, our online suite of tools. So constructing this chart was a lot easier than it might have been because Lauren, who's our head of development here at QSM, and the development team have done a really fantastic job of collecting up and capturing actual performance data for somewhere between 60 and 70 releases of SLIM products and projects over the last 4 decades. But even with the best data, interpreting it and making sense of it isn't always a straightforward process. When I was looking back through our history, there were early versions of our present applications and sort of standalone tools that were either deprecated or rolled into the existing tool suite. A couple of times, the entire suite was entirely rewritten to take advantage of new languages or operating systems or platforms. Periodically, the code has been re-architected, optimized, refactored, and we've watched the earliest versions of the tools that were written in really one language or possibly at most two, develop all the way until we get to our present environment in which we have a pretty much bewildering mix of third-party tools, web scripting languages, SQL, and along with more mainstream or general purpose languages like Java or C++ or C#. So with our latest code count for SLIM Collaborate, that included 13 distinct languages. So all of these changes and factors in development present measurement challenges that are no doubt familiar to most of you all because you're experiencing them and grappling with them day to day in your own environment. So we're going to start our walk through the product development timeline with the 1970s. So if you heard Larry's talk just a moment ago, he really gave you the in-depth story of how the SLIM methodology and the software equation came to be. I've always thought it was interesting that the impetus for the development of the software equation and all this research that took place wasn't the fact that we were in an academic setting or a lab or something like that. It was really prompted by a real-life scenario that was just as relevant today and probably as painful today as it was back then. What happens to organizations when they cannot produce credible, data-driven estimates to support their long-term software budgeting and planning? So back in 1975, you're going to get the Reader's Digest condensed version here. Again, Larry Putnam, Sr., our founder, was an Army officer working at the Pentagon. He lost $10 million literally overnight when he couldn't empirically support their future funding requests. And the name he chose for QSM, Quantitative Software Management, is really a great description of the approach that he took to solving this problem. By collecting up and analyzing real software data and trying to see the patterns in it, Larry was able to accomplish two really important goals. The first one is he was able to empirically demonstrate the impact of budget cuts on the Army's existing systems. And the second one that is really important today is that he was able to produce a model that would estimate the costs of new development. So by the end of the 1970s, we would see the very, very first version of SLIM, and it was hosted on a mainframe, and you could access it in a sort of a time-sharing version on a DEC System 20 mainframe, and it was written in Fortran. And as we walk through our product timeline, you're going to see things get rewritten, re-engineered, re-architected. So in the 1980s, what we're going to see is that SLIM moves to the desktop. We're starting to see for the very first time the desktop computer, and we're going to see some early versions of it. Right away in 1980, SLIM, we came out with a version of SLIM for the desktop, and it was on the HP 85, and it had a 32-character display and some fairly primitive, by today's standards, graphics. As the technologies developed during the 1980s, we would end up rewriting SLIM, so we ended up having a version of SLIM for the IBM PC, and then introducing the ability to collect historical data and use it to calibrate estimates to your actual performance. And then we have the earliest version of size modeling with our size planner. And this was really the great granddaddy of the size calculator that we know in SLIM Estimate today. It featured multiple sizing techniques that could be summed or averaged to help you get a better grasp of the estimated scope of a system that you were contemplating building. One final event that was very important during the 1980s is that Lauren Thayer and Doug Putnam joined the company in 1981, and Larry Putnam Jr. came aboard in 1987. The 1990s were a very, very busy decade. And they weren't busy just because of unfortunate design developments like tiled wallpaper and flashing HTML tags that would, in crazy colored fonts on websites. The 90s were also a really big decade for software development. There was a lot going on, both in the industry at large and within QSM. So with Windows beginning to develop, the use of personal computers spread to a much larger audience. We had advances in storage and processing power and memory that made PCs both more practical and more powerful. And finally, we had the advent of object-oriented languages, which really kind of changed the way that we both designed and thought and wrote software. And of course, towards the end of the 90s, the Y2K bug had companies frantically struggling to review and revise their enormous legacy applications to make them Y2K dependent, Y2K compliant. So during this decade, while all of this is going on, QSM was assembling the building blocks of what would eventually become the SLIM suite of applications. So we have SLIM Control coming on board at the beginning of the decade, and then we have the first version of SLIM Estimate for Windows on an IBM PC, and it's going to get rewritten in a new language. This is about the time that Measures for Excellence was published. And then we've got Metrics and Data Manager and SLIM-MasterPlan. By the year 2000, the size of the SLIM code base had more than doubled, from about 64,000 lines of code to nearly 200,000 lines of code. And 2 more full-time developers had joined the QSM family. So another big development that we had during the 1990s, this is just a little fun thing, was the advent of web servers and browsers. And I don't know how many of you remember Netscape or Netscape Navigator. If you were using it to get onto the internet, you may have more fond memories of it. If you were developing web applications, you may have less fond memories. But I used the Wayback Machine to go and find a snapshot of the QSM website in 1997. And I got a kick out of the tagline, "It's a jungle out there." So by the start of the new millennium, we've got all the building pieces of the modern SLIM suite. We have versions of those that have been developed. But starting with SLIM Metrics 2.0, the tools were re-architected with 2 goals in mind. The first one was to centralize the code that was common to all of the applications and make it more compact and efficient. And the second was to work towards releasing all 5 of the applications and making them capable of being installed at the same time. So this is similar to the way Microsoft Office was working at that time. And this was a big advance for both us and for our clients. One of the things we were hearing from our customers about this time was that they either had data in other applications that they were using, or they were very interested in how they could get data out of SLIM and either pipe it into other tools and data sources or perform some analysis on it. And so we developed APIs for SLIM Estimate, SLIM-DataManager, and SLIM Control. Another way we were able to expand the options available to our users were integrations with Microsoft Project, Microsoft Office, and the IBM suite of tools. I'm sorry, I meant to say IBM Rational. So by the end of this decade, the SLIM code base had nearly doubled again in size. This is just a little nostalgia here. This is our QSM website in 2001. I don't know how many of you can recognize these youngsters down here. It's a good thing that this is the last presentation of the day, or Laura and I would probably be in big trouble. is another blast from the past. So this is a slide from our 2006 user conference, and it shows the QSM product development timeline all the way from the beginning to the first PC version, first Windows version. This is when we start the suite concept with our common code and we get everything completed. And this was taken using SLIM-MasterPlan 6.3, so this is an early version of MasterPlan. You can contrast that with this screen snap from SLIM-MasterPlan 10.1. As you can see, MasterPlan has come a very, very long way. Very different look and feel. It's the same basic chart type, it just looks completely different. So that brings us to the current decade. And it also brings us to the part of our sort of code base chart that we looked at earlier, where for the very first time, in addition to these blue bars that were representing our desktop suite of applications, we introduced a new online version of SLIM Suite tools called initially SLIM Web Services and then SLIM Collaborate. SLIM Collaborate added several new capabilities to our desktop suite. So for the very first time, it made it possible to centralize the storage and maintenance of your project records, and also do so for projects in various stages of the product lifecycle, ranging all the way from very early ROM or feasibility estimates to more refined estimates to actual closeout records where we're capturing actuals at the end of a project. And you can see them all in the same project list and make them available across the enterprise. Another big feature that Collaborate introduced was what I like to think of as streamlined estimation. So we were trying to make estimation simple, or as simple as possible, so that we could broaden the audience for estimates and make them accessible to more people in the enterprise. And finally, our sort of schema of user accounts with roles and permissions allows enterprises to control access to data. So you have sensitive projects. Maybe you have certain groups of people who need to see data, and you have other groups of people that don't need to see that data, and you can actually fine-tune the access to your data and also to functions. So for instance, you may have stakeholders that you would like to share reports with, and you might want to share an estimate with a stakeholder, but you don't want them in there changing settings and calculating solutions. And on the other end of the spectrum, you may have project managers who not only need to create projects, but they need to be able to advance them through the life cycle. They need to be able to make changes. They may be wanting to change the project status in the workflow to trigger various actions that might take place. So Collaborate really offered a lot of ability to work, again, as the name implies, in a collaborative environment. But while all of this was going on, the desktop suite wasn't standing still. Starting with SLIM Estimate 8.2, we began to refine earlier versions of effort breakouts. So, for instance, SLIM Estimate could tell you that on Project X you might need 20 people. But that wasn't really enough information for some of our clients. What they wanted to be able to do was say, okay, how many developers am I going to need between May of 2010 and January of 2012? And they needed to be able to interface with PPM or resource demand management systems that they had and go out and be able to reserve these resources for their hiring decisions and make sure that they could get people on board when they needed them for their projects. And Laura's going to be talking about this a little bit later. So we started off introducing this into SLIM Estimate, and by SLIM 10.0, we had added these skills breakouts to SLIM Control and MasterPlan as well, along with the PPM integrations and things like SmartSheets, the Agile Adjuster, and different skills utilities that we'll be talking about in just a moment. This is just a quick snapshot of our website in 2013 when we were, shortly after we came out with SLIM Web Services, which again is now called SLIM Collaborate. So this brings us up to the present day. And what we'd like to talk about next is how you can extend the power that is in SLIM tools already, leveraging our APIs, utilities, and integrations. So right now we have our desktop applications, and we have a lot of power and ability built into these applications, and each one of them is designed to be used singly, or they can be used in concert with the rest of the suite. So you may only have a need to work with estimates, or you might be able to create your plans in SLIM Estimate, and you may want to bring them into SLIM Control, where you're going to track and enter some actuals and compare everything and forecast the most likely completion date. And when you're done with that, you can bring it into SLIM-DataManager. And the great thing about this is if you've used Control, you can bring in both the plan data, because I think there were several questions about this earlier. How do you go back and sort of benchmark your actual performance against what was estimated? Well, one way to do that is to track in SLIM Control. And when you import the completed project into DataManager, you'll get both the plan and the actual data, and you can actually compare them. And you can analyze all this information in our SLIM Metrics tool and create these custom performance trends that you can then feed back into your processes to get a little bit smarter. This is your learning curve. You're learning from what you've done before. You're tuning everything and adjusting your expectations so that they align with your actual capability at various points in time. And finally, you can roll it all up and get sort of a program or portfolio level view using our SLIM-MasterPlan tool. And to that, we've added SLIM Collaborate, which is on the web, and it really allows you to grant access at appropriate levels to various people within the enterprise. But there's actually a lot more to our tools than what you're going to see right out of the box. So what we'd like to talk about briefly is how you can use our APIs and utilities and integrations to accomplish a couple of important goals. One of them is to be able to connect to and exchange data with other applications that you might be using or data sources that you might already have in your environment. Another one is to build customized user interfaces that are tailored to your processes in your environment. And by doing this, you end up working smarter instead of harder, and it really helps you maximize the value of the investment that you've made in our tools. A big part of what makes extensions like these possible is our APIs. So some of you have probably built APIs and you know far more about them than I do. Some of you have used APIs, and some of you may be more in a business analyst function. You may not know all that much about an API. So what is an API? API stands for Application Programming Interface, and it's really nothing more than an interface that's designed to connect software applications with each other. And it helps them share data and functions. We're all already familiar with user interfaces. They're designed for use by human beings, and we know we can type data into a field and click a button and the application updates, it processes all of our requests, and it returns the results to us in a form that we can understand and use. APIs do the same thing, but when they're interacting, they're doing it for another application. So here we're showing, this is just one example, but we're showing Excel. So we're showing how you might connect Excel to our SLIM Estimate application, and you can send requests for data or for a particular action or a calculation, and they will pass all the way through and come back to Excel, and you've got a little bit of code in Excel that is going to tell you what to do with this information, where to put it, what to call it, all of those sorts of things. So that's sort of a very high-level conceptual, and by that I mean French for not 100% technically accurate, description of what you can do with an API. So this is another conceptual representation of our tool suite. And really, all I'm trying to show here is that these are our tools. This is MasterPlan, Estimate, Control, DataManager, our historical repository, and some metrics. And these little arrows are just indicating that built into our tools, we have the ability for each of our tools to pass information freely back and forth and to interact with each other. And that's very powerful all by itself. But what wasn't built into our tools originally was the ability to interact with other applications. So that's why we have APIs for Estimate, Control, and DataManager. And once you have these APIs, it makes it really easy for other applications to connect to or sort of plug in to the API and actually interact with other tools. If you've ever used MasterPlan, whether you knew it or not at the time, you're actually using the API. So one of the very first consumers of our APIs was our own MasterPlan tool, and what MasterPlan does under the sheets, when you're calculating different solutions, you're logging them, and you're maybe doing some what-ifing, and then you want to restore an earlier solution, the API is what keeps all the underlying subsystem files in sync and updates them as you're working in MasterPlan. And all of this is going on, in a way that you don't have to see or grapple with. We have some API demos up on our website, and they are implemented in Excel, and their purpose is just to show you some of the things that you can do with our APIs. And they also give you code samples, and there's documentation that's provided. But it really doesn't end there. We have things like the Agile Adjuster for SLIM Estimate, and Laura's going to be talking about that in just a moment. And we have our PPM framework and our Clarity Adapter. And we also have several sort of pre-configured implementations of our API that we call SmartSheets. They're Excel-based utilities. So as the name implies here, our data extraction SmartSheet is designed to pull data out of DataManager, our historical repository, and bring it out into Excel, where you can pretty much do anything you like with it. We have things like our data collection SmartSheet. So this can be actually used as a form that you could send to people who don't have DataManager. Maybe they don't have time in your organization. They don't want to go to DataManager training. You don't want to use a license for them, but you would like to be able to collect data at project closeout. You can send them this form and automatically populate DataManager with the information that they provide. We have an estimation SmartSheet, which is just one implementation of a customized user interface. So some of the ways that we've seen users implement our APIs, in addition to these things that we provide on our website, is again, a big use is to build a customized interface. So maybe you're just starting off and you don't need all the functions in SLIM Estimate. Maybe you want to focus your users on certain solution methods. Maybe you want to build in some sizing data so that your estimators have everything they need to do estimates right there. And you can also leverage our templates. We've had users pull data automatically from their time and effort reporting systems and use it to update SLIM control. So as the project is unfolding, they're just bringing in their data automatically. They're updating SLIM control and eliminating, manual data entry. And then they're actually able to run forecasts. Or if you're using DataManager, you can bring data in from maybe your in-house systems. And you can even use the API to run custom validation routines on your project. So maybe you want to check for missing data. You want to use this as a first cut at validating your data, or look for data that is maybe an outlier or outside an acceptable range. So there's a lot of flexibility and power built in here, and we really encourage you to take advantage of it and let us help you if you have questions or anything else. So what do you need to leverage the APIs? Well, the good news is they're included with our tools, and we have documentation and code samples and all sorts of stuff available up on our website. In addition to the sort of pre-configured implementations that you can download, so if you want a working example, you can download the things that we have up on our website. We'll be showing you how in just a moment. And if you've decided you want to write some custom code and create your own custom implementations of the API, you really need sort of a mid-level developer. Now, our code samples are in Visual Basic, but the API itself is language agnostic, so you can use whatever language you have expertise in and the language that is most appropriate for what you're building. But we're more than happy to answer questions and help you get going with these things. And here I've just got some resources. These are all things that are available on our website. And these slides will be available to you after our presentation today. So I'd like to encourage you to take advantage of them. At this point, I'd like to turn things over to Laura. So I'm going to pass control over to her if I can figure out how to do that. And she's going to show you some of the other tools that we mentioned, the Agile Adjuster and the PPM framework and the PPM adapter.
Okay, thank you, Kate. All right, so the Agile Adjuster, I'm going to explain this to you, and a lot of you I know have already been working with it, and hope that you find this helpful. So a key part of the configuring the SLIM lifecycle model is phase tuning. It's the arrangement of our phases themselves, one to another, and the relative time and effort in each one. Now, for Agile projects, we typically have a high degree of overlap between phases 2 and 3, and the duration of each phase is about the same. So I got a sample project up here, just a typical maybe 7-month duration we've done an estimate for. But where does the phase tuning information come from? Well, of course, there are settings in any template that you might pick up and start your estimate with, and that's certainly true in the Agile Story Point estimation template. Or even if you ran a balanced risk solution, then the phase tuning information is actually coming from the trends in that instance, or you could have changed it manually. So the Agile template that ships with SLIM is a good starting point for using the Agile Adjuster and modeling Agile projects, and it also includes some possible milestones, such as the minimum marketable features defined, similar to what Larry was talking about. But milestones in SLIM Estimate, as well as the phase tuning information, is specified in terms of the phase of the percentage of the duration of the phase in which they occur. Try to say that 3 times. So what is the Agile Adjuster? It's a SLIM Estimate API utility that aligns phase tuning and milestone data with sprint and iterations. When do they occur? And it's most valuable when you are using phase 2 or including that in your estimate. That story writing activity is included in the release estimate. So how does it work? You launch the Agile Adjuster from the custom menu item if configured, and Kate's going to explain that in a moment. And it can also operate in the background. So when you launch it, it's going to present a separate user interface on top of SLIM Estimate, and that's what you're looking at here. So you just need to give it a few pieces of information. We're going to specify the number of weeks in an iteration. That isn't the same for everyone. A lot of times I've seen customers using primarily 2 weeks now. There's sometimes folks are using 3 and 4 week iterations. So you enter that information, and as you can see here, the number of coding iterations, or basically phase 3 iterations, is computed by the adjuster. Next, you need to specify a couple more pieces of information. One is, how many iterations before development begins are you going to spend story writing? And then also the number of sprints prior to the end of development when story writing is going to end. We're modeling most of the time consumable releases in SLIM, and at some point we have to stop working on the backlog and get the product out the door. Either of these two numbers actually can be 0. And if you're using milestones, that's this second block down here, we want to specify the number of sprints either from the start or the end of development in which you expect that milestone to occur. So just to kind of summarize things on this slide, mostly for reference information, there's a few inputs, each one that I described to you, number of weeks per iteration, when the story writing going to end and begin, and you might have these other two bullets, milestone coding begins and milestone that story writing ends. Those are internal milestones that the adjuster needs to read and know about for itself. And then, of course, if you're going to include any other milestones. The outputs are the number of iterations in phase 3, and maybe for the whole project we can get that. This second bullet is an internal calculation. It's not really displayed, and you don't need to be concerned about it. So what we're really interested in is having our start and end dates of the phases and our milestones all align with our occurrences of the beginning and ends of our sprints or iterations, whichever term you want to use. I'll probably use them interchangeably. So what does it really do? Well, we've kind of explained that, but I wanted to give you this example. This diagram we actually have in the new version of SLIM Estimate Training to show how we typically would like to recommend modeling Agile releases. And so in this one, if you can count very quickly, you would see that for this project we would end up with, if we 2-week sprints would be 10 sprints for this one. So what you would do is select an Agile template. Maybe you run a trend-based solution for a new release, say 800 story points. And you might get something like 9.7 months or 6.4 people. And you might after that need to maybe run another design to team size solution to constrain it to the appropriate team size. And you're almost done. Now you want to run the Agile Adjuster and log that solution. So what's going to happen? We get the phase 2 and phase 3 dates lining up with your sprint occurrences and any milestones excuse me, that you would have included as well. So we're currently working on some templates that will use the Agile Adjuster to actually show all of your sprint lines or maybe some program increment lines for larger programs. So keep your eyes open for those. So how do I use the Agile Adjuster, or how do I get a hold of it? It's available for download from our QSM support downloads page in the utility section. And it is a package that will come with an installation guide and user guides. One caution for this one, and also for certainly the PPM integration and maybe some of our other ones, you will need to secure admin rights to your computer or get your IT support folks to help you do the installation, simply because you'll be writing to the programs area of your computer, and with the way Windows is locking things down these days, it may not want you to do that. The easiest way really is just to contact either Kate or myself at QSM Support. It'll be a lot quicker. I just did an Agile Adjuster download and installation yesterday in about 10 minutes. So next I'd like to explain to you the SLIM PPM connector. It's also a SLIM estimate only API utility at the moment. And as Kate mentioned, prior to SLIM 8.2, we had a breakout of resources such as program or project manager, but it was tied to tasks in the WBS. So at customer's request, the breakout changed to produce the data on resources by role by month. And you can either get this data in terms of staffing, full-time equivalents, which is what we're looking at here, or effort and person hours, and also cost, of course. And you can see in this example how, let's look at programmer. Of course, it's happening for the other resources as well. but the resources build up and down at different points in the life cycle. Skill categories are what we call in SLIM the roles or resources that are required on the team. And in SLIM Estimate, they are broken out first by phase and then by time slices, which are points in the life cycle when the team mix or their utilization may need to change. And so you set up a schema for that and allocate your resources at different points in the life cycle, and this is free for you to define. Each of our templates comes with a notional schema that's loosely tied to the type of project or application that it is, but we would encourage you, of course, to customize these for yourself. So for example, let's say after a requirements phase ends, the hours needed for a business analyst drops and the need for developers would increase. And we have a couple of different ways you can specify the resources. We have 2 videos on the QSM support video tutorials page that explain all of this in more detail, or I can coach you if you're interested, but this is the foundation of the PPM integration, which is really what we're interested in today. So how does the PPM integration work? The SLIM PPM connector produces a detailed resource demand plan using the resource data and project goals that are read in from your PPM application. So we currently have a published integration to CA PPM, Computer Associates, so these are the screens that I will be showing, but other PPM tool integrations are actually sort of half-built. We've got the PPM framework that ships with SLIM right now. That's our half of the integration, if you will. And so the PPM adapter is what we would use to customize that for other tools. Like the Agile Adjuster, a separate user interface is presented, and that's what you're looking at here. And so the first thing you would do is you would perform an estimate in SLIM Estimate, get the resulting duration, cost, and resources, and save that. And that information, when you're done, will get saved to the PPM project information. So create an estimate, and minimally in SLIM Estimate we have to have a size. We have no estimate unless we have a size estimate first. And you launch the PPM connector from SLIM Estimate custom menu if configured, or again it can be in the background. And then the first thing you're going to do is select in the PPM tool which project do you need to associate, a project or idea do you want to associate this estimate with. And then SLIM PPM integration can pull in the information about the project summary in terms of cost and schedule. So you'll see this area of the screen once you make the selection update. We've got the cost information, the desired schedule perhaps in the PPM system, and the desired cost or amount of money that someone thinks they need to budget. There are 4 configuration areas in the PPM that you'll have to set up, but once you set them up, then they're saved within your SLIM workbook. So I'm not going to show you the configuration resources tab right now. I'm going to highlight a couple of main pieces for you in just a second, but you need to, we'll do some skill to role mapping. Those are the 2 different terms in Estimate SLIM tools versus the PPM tool. You can specify strategic strategies for how to apply the resource. If we're going to have 3 different developers, are they all starting on day 1, or do they come onto the project at different times? And there's 3 strategies for that you can pick from. Item number 3 is building out what we call sub-skills, and this is the real power. SLIM will tell you at the high level maybe you need 9 developers, but you need to specify at a further level different characteristics about those resources, and I'll be showing you that. And because you may not have thought about it, but SLIM is always giving you a labor cost only, and PPM tools deal with other costs like capital cost and operating cost, then you can specify the percent breakout of those things so that we're talking apples and apples. The way it works is that once you get the link between the two projects, you have a couple of options. You can run a single estimate in SLIM-Estimate by just applying the schedule constraint from the PPM as a goal. You can do just the cost constraint as an estimate, or you can choose to run both of them. So you might do that, take those informations, those solutions are logged in SLIM-Estimate, and then you can go back to SLIM-Estimate, do your what-ifing, figure out the recommended solution, then you're ready to push that information back over to CAPPM. And you have two choices here. You can update this high-level project cost and schedule information, which is probably a good idea. And then you can also update the detailed, within CAPPM, it's called the Team tab, and the detailed schedule and placeholders for all of the resources and when they should start and stop, and the amount of person hours associated to each is written. So the first step, configuration step I mentioned just quickly, is to do the mapping. So at the high level, you're simply a one-to-one correspondent. So you would map it, we're called developer in the CAPPM, and then you would have programmer in your skills allocation. You just associate one to the other. It may be testing in the CAPPM, and you called it quality assurance in SLIM-Estimate. We just map one-to-one at the high level each of those skills. What you're looking at here then is how to define those sub-skills. You have the opportunity to define a sub-skill by resource characteristic, and that's just a fancy term for saying we can associate lower level of detail by location, maybe they're onshore or offshore, maybe it's by expertise. Here we're looking at an example of a Java expert versus a Java beginner, and then I need someone in networking. So you can see over here that the important part is that the information that builds out your choices is coming from the configuration within the CAPPM tool. So it all lines up and you're reading data dynamically from that system. And the labor rates will also come in from the cost tables within the CAPPM. This is an example of that Team tab in CAPPM. So what we kind of call them just placeholders. This is a list of the resources required. You can see here that if we just look at developer, say we had 3 developers originally. Well, now because we've broken that out into sub-skills, we've got 9. And they start at different times, roll off at different times, and have different labor rates or different amount of effort allocated to them, if you will. We do have, this is for CAPPM connector specifically, requires a separate license. So if you're interested, you can talk to your representative, your QSM rep for that. Again, just like the Agile Adjuster, it comes with you can download it, and it comes with installation and user guides. Again, the easiest thing to do is just contact me, and I will happy to walk you through that. We do have a one-way integration for the PPM adapter to Excel. So it doesn't read any information in, but it allows you to specify those sub-skills and spit the information back out.
So hopefully we've gotten you all fired up, and you just can't wait to head up to our website and download all these utilities and API demos, and we've also got just a huge array of resource documents and things like that. But once you do that and, you know, get an idea of how you can build some more process into SLIM tools and customize them and simplify your life, how do you keep track of all this sort of thing? Well, this is a screen snap from my machine, and we have a really nifty feature built right into SLIM tools, and it requires very little configuration. It's called custom menu extension items, or actually I said that wrong. But what you're seeing in that red outline there are actual links to reference documents and utilities and APIs, and actually some Microsoft Office and other tools that can be launched right from within each SLIM tool. So this is from my machine. What I've done is I've gotten all these things configured on my machine, and when I'm working, particularly under a deadline, I don't want to have to stop and think, where is this document? Where did I save it? I can actually launch all the relevant resources right from SLIM-Estimate. Now, if I were showing you Data Manager, I'd have a different set of documents. Can you do the next slide, please? The good news is this is very, very easy to configure. You don't have to be a rocket scientist or a programmer. We've got instructions right in our online help. We've got resources on our blog, and most importantly, we really do urge you to just contact us directly. We're more than happy to help you get this set up, but it's a real time saver. Next slide. And I'd like to show you one final thing. In our SLIM Collaborate online tool, we have a similar function which actually allows you to call external applications right from within SLIM Collaborate. This is a little bit more technical than the custom extension menu items. It does require some help from our development staff. But basically what this does is it allows you to set up status changes in your project's workflow. So for instance, you have an estimate and it's been approved and you want to trigger a particular action. Maybe you want to call the Agile Adjuster, or maybe you want to pipe some staffing data breakouts out to your PPM tools. It allows you to sort of automate all of this from within SLIM Collaborate. So again, we urge you to check out the documentation and give us a call. Next slide, please. I'm going to talk very briefly, because we're running out of time, about some upcoming releases. We will, of course, have much more detailed information on this. This is just a heads up. We have some point releases of SLIM Collaborate and the desktop suite coming out. In Collaborate, we're going to be bringing Contingency. Someone had asked about this earlier with one of our Collaborate users. What do you do about contingency in SLIM Collaborate? Previously, you would have had to do some of this in SLIM-Estimate, and we're building this all into SLIM Collaborate, but we're going one step better. We're going to also add to our normal sort of probability or uncertainty-based risk buffering the ability to define fixed contingency profiles. So this would be appropriate for a situation where maybe you want to set management reserve by policy for different contract vehicles. If you've got a fixed price contract, you might need more management reserve than you do with time and materials. And so this allows you to set up flexible structures to risk buffer your estimates. We mentioned earlier that we get some of our best ideas from our clients, and we really do like working with you. So we really do encourage you to contact either Laura or myself with your ideas or your challenges, anything that you want, and we will do our best to make it happen. And that brings us to our Q&A.
I already have one question, which is, are the QSM target roles mappable to SFIA framework or already designed according to SFIA?
I can field that one. So the roles that are specified in the templates that we have are based on our experience, what we typically see, team makeups and the consulting engagements and working with customers all these many years. We don't collect that detailed level of information in Data Manager, and even if we did, nobody would call the same role the same thing, and we couldn't make any sense out of it. So they are notional only. They're starting points to give you ideas of what's possible for you. Your history is the best source of how to build out your skills allocation.
And I would just add to that these things are all customizable. That's one of the nice features about our templates is once you've customized a SLIM-Estimate file the way you want it, you've gotten all the skills, names, and labor rates and everything so that they fit what's in your environment, you can reuse those settings over and over again. So it helps you not have to do configuration work more than once.
Is there an API for SLIM Collaborate?
I can field that one. This is Kate. Not yet, but we have had requests for that, and so that's something that we've got in our backlog. Like everybody else, we've got a backlog of requests that we work with, and that's one of them. So.
Okay. Is every field and function in SLIM Suite exposed in the API?
No, not necessarily. This is a great, you can kind of answer that one two different ways. You know, you could take the hard way and download our documentation and sort through it and try to figure out what's in there, or the quick way to get an answer to that is if there's something that you need to use, give us a call and we'll tell you whether it's exposed via the API. If it's not, it sounds like an enhancement request to me, and we're more than happy to help you with that.
I think we have one more question in case we have any last-minute questions, but we've got one for right now, which is what kinds of size measures does QSM use to estimate future releases?
We've done different things at different times. Typically, we let, like several of our other presenters, we let our subject matter experts do a lot of our estimation, and we try to give them the freedom to use the units that are most convenient to them and the way they think about the functionality. But at various times, we've used ideal hours. I don't know that we're using that quite so much anymore, but it's something we tried out for a while. We do a lot of Agile story sizing, basically. So it's small, medium, and large stories, epics, things like that. And then depending on where we are in the life cycle and how much we know, if it's a really early estimate, sometimes we'll do sizing by analogy. And the nice thing about that is since we've been collecting data for so long, we have some pretty good data about past features. And so a lot of times our developers can say, well, this sounds really similar to this other thing that we built. Let's go find out how big that was. And they can actually use sizing by analogy.